Board for March 2nd, 2023. Everybody please rise for the pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, our agenda this evening is as follows. It's posted on the town website and the town board. Number one, waiver of subdivision. Applicant seeks to subdivide an approximately 11.36 acre parcel to create two new parcels containing 2.03 acres and 9.33 acres on property located on 14 Ridge Road. Stefan Rye is the applicant. Number two, Riser, waiver of subdivision. This is tentative, you can see it tonight, but applicant seeks to transfer approximately 17.151 acres on 10 Blank Lane to an adjacent parcel. Henry Riser is the applicant. How are you?
Good, how are you?
We just gotta do a little business before we get to you, hold on. To review the minutes of our past meeting for February 16th. Has everybody had an opportunity to review those? Are there any questions, comments, amendments?
On page 4, about midway down. After intersections improvement, I think there should be a period, and then a new sentence should start.
That the applicant agreed to work with New York State DOT on road and intersection improvements, period. Capital S, site grades, building locations and traffic circulation.
I think that's a separate,
Yeah, there's something.
missing there. but-
I think it's all there. So we don't want to.
Right, so that was actually just listing out things that Mr. Freitag was discussing.
Okay.
It might be better simply to separate things with semicolons rather than commas, so
Thank
why don't we do
Okay. Anyone else have any questions? Okay, hearing none, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as they were amended.
I'll second.
Second, any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Now moving into our agenda, Mr. Lau. At our last meeting, there was discussion. Now, you weren't at our last meeting.
I was.
Oh, yeah, okay.
My name's Dan Peters with Capital District Planning, today I'm representing the client.
Okay. There was some discussion as to determining how many houses were on a dead-end street and how it impacted Ridge Road and your rate. At that time, Mr. Golden is going to firm that up and make a determination on that, would you?
The 16 sites as described with the definition of a single entrance and exit, taking that single entrance and exit from the crossways. It would be a total of 16 residences in here. Obviously, as you go down Ridge Road and you take off High Meadow Road and you take off Fox Hollow, that number drops. But purely as the definition states, one entrance, one exit, that would define the crossways to be that.
So then, you're basically saying it's beyond the 12 houses and it would require a waiver by the town board, I believe. Is that correct, Andy?
I did not dig into what the last construction was there. I'm sorry, when the last lot was made there, because there was new construction at 10 Ridge Road. And if you remember that one, remember that was a lot line adjustment. The parcel existed, the owner just wanted a little more land. So that was just a lot line adjustment.
Okay.
And the, taking the count the way I did at that point from Ridge Road or after the intersection of Fox Hollow, you would then have, actually, it was 11 lots, and the next lot that would be separated would have been 12.
Okay.
So
So now what are you saying, based on a prior decision for 10 Ridge Road, which I believe is Joe Luciano's house, is that correct?
that's great.
You now have determined that it could be the 12th house, the 12th lot. Is that correct?
This split would be the 12. You would have 10 after Ridge. But it's where you want to take the datum as to where we start. If we take the crossways, then there are 16 houses in that area, comprising 3 different cul-de-sacs. And I don't know when the last time the town board looked at increasing the lots in this area. There are the lots number per cul-de-sac. I don't know if that was done by number 8 Ridge Road, who had that lot at 10. If that was included, that would take a lot of research.
Where do we start, Andy?
Well, I think the board will need that information on how this was previously treated. You do need the record on this, unfortunately. Looking at the definition under the subdivision regs for dead end or cul-de-sac road, it literally identifies it by only one way in and out. If you look at the layout on this, it's a building department decision, interpreting what that provision means, okay? Correct. If you take it from the crossways, which seems to be one way in and out for all the interior lots, it's 16. But if you're not counting, what is it, Fox Hollow?
Well, the first one is High Meadow, which takes up 2 homes, Ussalini and another. That's the first cul-de-sac. Second cul-de-sac is Fox Hollow. And then the ridge goes up and winds around and ultimately makes a third
If you don't
cul-de-sac.
count Fox Hollow, I think you need to conclude that that has its own separate way in and out. And then it's 10, and that's ultimately up to the building department, but I think you should have the record on how the town's treated this in the past. But certainly the way I read the regs, the underlying policy regarding this number of lots is for safe access. If there is one access way block, that there's a secondary means of access, and that the town has determined through its subdivision regulations that up to 12 lots would be safe with simply one means of in and out. But more than that would require the town board to look at that. They will need to determine where you start counting for the one means of ingress and egress. That's how it's defined in the subdivision.
And I guess what I am looking for is any action by the town board in this, for this area, for the increase of lots, or for a violation of the cul-de-sac rule, and see if the lots, if the lots were, as this got built out, if they were incrementally increased. So that's gonna be hunting through the town board records.
Just for the sake of a quick discussion.
Mhm.
If in fact we determined that it was over the 12, it was actually 16, and there would have to be a waiver to the town board, they would have to approve that, correct?
Yes.
Then the discussion would be for us to make a recommendation to the town board. So let's just for the minute assume that,
Mhm.
just for the sake of argument, that would be has to be done. I'd like just a couple minutes discussion on whether there would be a problem with approving it, or making a favorable recommendation, let's put it that way.
So we'll take a look at weighing the risks of,
Well, what I'm saying is, if this is now the 16th lot, there has to be obviously a record of the 14th.
I sure hope so.
13th, 14th, and 15th houses.
I would sure hope
And that's
so.
what you were charged with trying to find out.
Exactly.
So apparently before, there was probably discussion if there had to be a waiver. I'm just trying to figure out, well, I guess I got the cart before the horse. But I'm trying to figure out whether, just to have some brief discussion on whether anybody really has a problem with the 16th house.
Right, but probably cart before the horse, because if the town board has had some discussion on this, you should be privy to that record before you start deliberating on a waiver.
Okay, all right.
Did we in fact, review the 33-foot wide right of way with the town highway department to verify that they maintain that? Right of way?
I didn't I just sent that map to you, Andy, as to what
I do have
all right, and I sent a second, oh no, this is the same. Okay, they plow right up to this area right here.
You can send that one down, I have another one.
Oh, okay.
Is that paved?
Yes,
Okay.
yes,
Do they maintain that also?
yes. The ditching in there as well.
What's the paved width?
The paved width, it's probably 2 cars could go by. So it's not full road width, but it's wider than it would typically have.
And another paved width?
I don't.
I see it's 33-foot right of way.
It is,
Yeah.
and actually, I did a little research on it. When Arcadians sold this parcel, there's language in the deed. It says presently being a user road, 33 feet plus or minus in width, running through the property conveyed herein and presently maintained by the town of Brunswick. And this is a deed. So it's obviously been maintained for quite some time.
So is that a town road by use?
Correct.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so now,
And so they will maintain to the ditches as well.
so does that solve the problem of having, if we split this off, then the major part of the property that's to be kept now will be landlocked technically only to the user part of the road. Is that acceptable?
Um, So on this issue, okay, I need someone to determine where the road is actually located, whether the current lot has frontage on that road, and whether the proposed subdivided lots each will continue to have frontage on the public road. And someone needs to review that and make that determination. Because the resulting lots, in order to meet the legal requirements, still need to have a minimum of 15 feet of frontage on the improved public road.
Isn't that shown?
Does a road by use indicate a public road?
A highway use is a public road, correct. But we need to know that each of the resulting lots have frontage on that public road.
Can you comment on that?
I would say they do. Newton, Avery are the two other lots that utilize this road
No, it's the existing home.
and the existing home. Yes.
Where's its frontage on the
Can-
improved
can you-
public road?
Dan, can you move the thing a little bit there? So I've got everybody up a little bit.
So the existing home comes in and out of this driveway. And then from here, this is the user road.
Correct. Where's the lot line though for the existing house?
This dark bold line is the lot line.
Oh, so they own, they got a little,
Yes, this was actually Kenyon, gained title to this when they sold this parcel.
okay, yeah, that each resulting lot would have frontage.
Yes.
Now, was there any other issues that we had to address?
There was that, the encroachment of the pin in the driveway in the north,
And
north side of
that's
the
a pre-existing condition. This was surveyed in 2008. And the driveway was there then. As far as I know, it's never been tested. It's 5 square feet, I figured. Determine what the area of the encroachment is. I can reach out to my client and they can have a discussion with the McNaughtons and determine what they want to do. Like I said, it's been there for prior to 2008.
Do they have room to move it if they have to? I mean, is it totally,
Yes.
is it just flat through there? If they had to shift it over?
It's on a slight slope, but I mean, to cut that part of the driveway out and move it over.
And what is the width there at that narrowest point? The frontage or something?
I can get my scale.
Do not have a dimension.
Surveyors.
I would say over 20 feet.
A little over half an inch, so it was moving 1.5. No, that's the space between the property lines that the driveway goes through. Paved width, driveways. About 12 and a half. 12 and a half. Roughly.
would a letter from the adjacent property owner
But
suffice?
this one, in my opinion, is different than the one we dealt with previously, in that this is an existing condition. There's no proposed lot line adjustment in the area of that driveway. The new proposed lot would have its separate frontage on Ridge Road, and the resulting remaining lot is an existing condition. So I do view this different than Cronell's project, where we're creating the building lots, and the lot itself is what had the driveway encroachment located on it.
Okay, so, out of the three problems, we have two of them basically
Here
decided.
so,
Yes.
it's progress.
There we go. So, now we'll have to just wait for you to do a little research to determine whether you need a waiver on the additional, house on the other side. So, is there anything else you want? Did you change anything on the?
Nothing's been changed, it's still the same. After we had,
Okay.
The only thing, would you be able to do a conditional approval if it is determined that it's 10 existing lots rather than 16, or are we gonna come back for another?
Would you like to?
In my opinion, that the record should be in front of the board before you act on the application.
Okay.
Yeah, the subdivision regulations prohibit you from acting on it if it is determined that it's over 12 lots. You know? Yeah, but that's an open question. I don't want any issue regarding even a conditional approval.
Okay.
Do you think that information will be available at our next meeting?
It's a heck of a lot of research. I would like to ask the board, can they remember the last time any subdivision was done in here? Just to give me an idea what year to start at.
This one's 08, right?
There was,
That's when they did the survey.
Where are you seeing that, Dave?
But that's what he just said. Thank you.
2019 was the lot line adjustment.
Yeah, that was for between 10 and 8, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
2002. I'm just looking, there's a file map from 2002 that was done by Wiley surveyors on that lot. I don't know if it was a subdivision, I don't recall.
No,
I
gives me a place
I
to
can
start.
look into it and I can send you the map.
Wouldn't Luciano's be a?
No, because that was a lot line, so that was an existing lot.
I thought that was all one parcel. And he gave it.
You said this survey is done in 2008?
I thought it was one parcel.
The one that,
No.
for 10 Ridge Road.
Yeah.
And he just took a little bit away from me. He wanted a
Was
little
there a
more
house
land.
there
It
prior to that, or was it just a lot?
was just a lot. It was not a house.
This survey was done in 2022, recent. When I speak of the previous survey, it was done by Charlie Hartman in 2008.
For what purpose?
I believe it was just a boundary survey.
Just for, so they knew what they had?
It's basically a survey of a portion of the lands of Arcadian.
He didn't sell a lot or?
Arcadian, and I believe he owned a lot that is Avery's here. So he surveyed out that parcel prior to.
He didn't create a lot then?
No.
All right. Got some digging to do.
Andy, what are we looking for as far as information goes? To me, that's throwing it getting away, it's pretty clear to me that it's over 4 lots. I mean, what are we gaining by researching? Just not going to the board and asking for.
Well, I think Chuck indicated that the town board may have already addressed this issue, and if there were certain findings regarding the waiver
Oh.
at the time, that should be taken into account on now adding additional lots if there had been a waiver. We may find that the board never addressed it.
Gotcha.
The lots just exist. That may be what the record could show, but if there were findings made,
Gotcha.
yeah, it should have those.
Okay. I think you're gonna come before us again.
Okay.
Our next meeting is scheduled for the 16th. Put you on the agenda. Hopefully,
Get something by then.
yeah, we'll have something on it. All right?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, second on our agenda tonight is Riser waiver of subdivision. How you doing, Henry?
Good, how was on tonight?
Good. You weren't at our last meeting when we discussed this under new business, but we had to find out whether it could be actually treated as a waiver or was a possibly a amendment to the subdivision.
That's the old, that's what this was divided on.
Did we figure out when all this went happen? When did you have the original subdivision? I know it was a while ago.
Yeah, the original subdivision started back in 2016,
Okay?
and I don't know, maybe if I can explain what I'm trying to do. It's just, currently, I have the 70-acre lot, which is lot 12, and then I also own all the additional acreage around it. And what I need to do is, because of a recent 5-year dragged out, beat down divorce, I gotta remortgage the house. And no mortgage company wants to take a mortgage on the 70 acres. So what I want to do is a lot line adjustment, just to take the 70-acre lot, reduce it down to roughly a 17-acre lot, and then that remainder land will just go on to my other land that surrounds it. So just adjust the lines, so it makes the lot smaller, just for the purposes of making it smaller. You know, it's the same exact frontage, same driveway, there's no new construction, there's no additional lots. You know, all it's doing is making the 71-acre lot down to a 17-acre lot, and then the remaining land around it, which is roughly 200 something, will get the additional land.
The only question I have is, does that remaining parcel have access to a road?
It's gonna have the same access that it had before, which is the second gate. You can see there's a second driveway in yellow on there on the big map. So there's two
Oh,
driveways
okay.
that come in.
Yeah.
So that's always been the access to the remaining land. So that's gonna stay the same. It's just that remaining land is gonna get, 50 acres bigger. And then lot 12 is gonna get 50 acres smaller. So all the accesses are the same. Basically it's just, the lot that are being changed, and you can see on the map, it's got a dotted line. That was the original. You can see it on there, it's just a dotted line, that was the original lot 12. And you can see now that, it's just shrunk. And like I said, it's for the purposes of getting the mortgage, so they can refinance it and buy the farm again.
Okay.
And again, the driveway is the same, the accesses are the same for both the remaining land and the existing lot. It's just gonna be smaller.
In the original subdivision, you had to make some modifications to the road. Is that correct? Those were all made and everything like that.
Yep, everything was completed.
Have you sold any of the lots?
No, we haven't sold anything. everything's pretty much been on halt because of the divorce.
Okay. Well, I don't know whether we can treat this just as a waiver or it's gonna have to be an amendment to the original subdivision. So I'm gonna have to ask Andy on that.
Yeah, that's just, as I said earlier, with you, that's really just the form of the application of you reviewing the the substance of what's being proposed, whether it's in the nature of a waiver application or an amendment to a prior major subdivision plat. What you should make sure Rod Michael does is make it clear, you've got a major subdivision plat filed with the county clerk's office that shows the existing lot sizes.
Yeah.
There's got to be something very clear on the map indicating that this is amending the prior map, and indicate that lot 12 is now X acres and the remaining lands of Y, riser are Y acres. So, and that gets recorded too, so it's clear at the county clerk's office what the current lot size is for 12 in your remaining lands. So I think when you should review that and just make sure that everything that should be on the plat, to make it clear that this would be amending a prior major subdivision plat as we filed in the county clerk's office. As I said to you, Russ, earlier, I've done this on other major subdivisions where there's been a minor modification, and it doesn't necessarily need to entail revising the full, in this case, 12-lot subdivision. You can have a section of the map and indicate it's an amendment, but that's got to be very clear that it's amending the prior plat. You should reference the map number and everything. Just make it very clear on the current plan that it's amending the prior one.
And the county doesn't need action by the planning board to make.
Oh, no, you do need action by the planning board. It will need to be stamped and signed
Yeah.
by the planning board in order to get recorded in the county clerk's office. Yep.
So for our purposes, since we don't have an major subdivision amendment procedure,
Well, you don't, and that's why I will tell you, in my experience has been, I have gone in and gone through a fairly simplified procedure to get that minor change to a full major subdivision plat without going through all of the procedures of a major subdivision review for a fairly minor change. In some respects, this could be viewed simply as a lot line adjustment in the ordinary course, but because it is going to be a change to a filed major plat, it should be clear that that's what the legal effect of this will be, and that it gets filed in the county clerk's office.
So this is amendment to a major subdivision. I would say all the lots should be shown, correct? Right now, they're not.
No, I understand that. And I guess I'll defer on how the board wants it done, but I have done it with a small section on a major subdivision without showing the full. In my case, it was, a 23 lot subdivision, and it only amended a very small area on the whole plat, and I did a much reduced just section, but I had to reference the underlying plat number. However the board wants to do it. If you want the full plat layout, that's up to the board's preference.
Did Rod Michaels do the original subdivision?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Did Rod Michaels do the original subdivision?
Yes, it did.
Okay, so it wouldn't be hard for him to bring those back up and change it, right?
It would basically just be putting this amended lot 12 on the existing subdivision.
I think that's what he was planning on doing, because you can see on here, it shows that dotted line, which was the existing lot line, and then showing the new amended, smaller plan. So I think that's what he was planning on doing, because creating the full map, like you said, showing all the lots, and then it would show the same way it showed lot 12, but it would just show it this way with the dotted, with what the existing one was, and then what the change was to the 17. Is that the information that you need on, just be a full map? Does it replace the other one down there?
Yeah,
Take the other one.
no, it'll still stay there. There'll be a plat note indicating it's amending and modifying the prior subdivision plat filed in the county clerk's office and whatever. You just make sure Rod references where that has been filed. There'll be a map number. And that this would likewise be filed as amended with prior map.
Assist, Michael's on that? You need a question for that?
Yeah. Yeah, probably dig up the old map too, somewhere.
I have it right here. This is the original one. But I think with speaking with Ryan, I think that's what he intended on doing.
I mean, he does have a location sketch up in the upper right that does show all of the lots. And it shows the outline of the original lot 12. I'm not sure that's necessary to do the whole map. This is an amendment, and then once it gets filed, references.
I think it can be done either way. It's just however the board prefers to see it.
Is there a specific title that needs to be on the map rather than it says now lot line adjustment map?
There's no bond adjustment of land. Maybe those are lots
I
12.
think we went already, might have been, just use that map right there.
Yeah, because over here, it really looks like a tax map.
Based on this discussion, I mean, if Rod has got the underlying plat already, and he can just show the revised lot line for 12 and generate the plat. You can work with Wayne on what the title block should be and add probably a plat note or two dealing with amending the prior plat and where it's been filed.
So we have
be able to do that.
we can't take action on that tonight, correct?
Correct, that should get prepared and then submitted, and then when it's appropriate to discuss it. If you see any issues with the proposal, we can discuss it now.
I don't see any issues with it. I mean, it is basically a lot line adjustment on one lot.
Well, he has to file the appropriate application too. It's not gonna be a major subdivision. It's gonna
Site plan amendment.
be, right?
This is
Well,
what
that's what I'm saying, there is no application for that, is there?
Yeah, this always comes up again. We're looking at the same subdivision. It's really a form of application. It is modifying a major subdivision plat, I understand that, but subjecting that proposal to the full procedure on the major subdivision, that does, in my opinion, seem excessive. It's really the form of the application. It's certainly not a minor subdivision, but could you require a major subdivision application? I guess you could, but
Or do you just,
Well, this is not the first time we've done this.
a site plan application?
well, we've done lot line adjustments on the waiver application.
Well, we've done amendment to the subdivision too.
So do we just modify this, the title of this piece of paper that's been submitted to the document?
So Chuck,
You know, I would just, the description of existing lot will have a lot line.
and you're the one that has to process this application, so once the board figures out
With the same information contained in both, we might just well use the existing form.
Okay.
I'm gonna be spending a lot of time looking at town board records, so let's streamline this.
All right.
I got a question, Henry. How come you're not including the pond in your?
Yeah, I thought that was strange too.
Just added more acreage, you know, the reason is that the mortgage company don't want to give mortgages over 20 acres. And I added the pond to it, pushed it over to 20 acres, so it's just more or less just to keep it under 20 acres so I can get the mortgage.
You own both parcels anyway, at this point.
Right. Yeah, we plan on, you know, keeping it until it sells.
How many acres is the pond?
Pond's about 8 acres.
Is there any other questions? Anything else that has to happen here? Yeah. John Marcus is going to redo the map.
There's not a lot he has to do. It's got to regular property, map purposes and stuff like that.
If Brian has any questions, he's got contact.
Okay,
All right?
we'll prepare that.
You think you'll have it by next meeting? Okay. We'll put you on by next meeting on March 16th.
Yeah, I don't know if it's taken under that, but.
Okay?
Thank you very much, have a good night.
Okay, thanks, Aaron. Okay, now under new business, we have one thing that was, application was actually received from a Anthony Grab. This is a minor subdivision. The immediate question we had, and you answered it initially, Chuck, was why is this a minor and not just a
A
waiver?
waiver.
You just kind of review that with the board right now?
It was due to previous subdivisions of this parcel.
And how long ago was that?
What was it, 4 years,
4 years
Anthony?
ago?
4 years ago.
So you're aware of that?
Yeah. Just as a matter of record, related to the applicant and adjoining landowner.
I am also related to the applicant.
Okay, so,
And I'm the attorney here.
how are we gonna do this, Andy? We got 4 people. We have a quorum.
The mere fact that you're an adjoining property owner doesn't require recusal. The mere fact that you're a family member doesn't in and of itself require recusal.
Okay,
If there's no direct economic benefit from the applicant, there's no legal necessity to recuse. You can, if you choose to, given those relationships, but otherwise, if you think you can objectively review the application, there's no required recuse.
okay,
And you,
you notified the board that you are. Can you,
Yes, I can.
you can? Okay? Linda, let the record show that all 3, so that they can review this application without prejudice. All right, so moving forward, give us a brief idea of what you're gonna do here. It looks like you just got approximately 11 acres.
Yeah.
Just wanna-
Yeah, we just wanted to subdivide off 11 acres. I think 3 of the boundaries are already existing, so we're just creating one, and it's gonna go with hedgerow.
Okay. Is there plans to put up residence on this?
Yes.
I was wondering
Now,
if
is
you,
there any houses around us?
The closest house is across the street.
Okay. Carlo?
Yes.
then Patsy Doyle.
Mary Doyle, to tell them.
Well, this is 11 acres. We don't have to do anything. There doesn't have to be a health department approval at this point. So 5,
Can do a non-realty subdivision.
That's correct.
okay?
What's the topo like? These were previously cultivated fields.
Yes, there's a slight field, field, closer to the other ones.
We require a topo for a minor subdivision.
Okay, yeah, I just got it.
Subdivision regs require a minimum of 10-foot contours for the minor.
For the whole property.
And we also stated the line of sight for the driveway as well. Anthony's aware of that, and the next survey will show the site distance from the proposed driveway.
Okay?
Like an overlay on a USGS map. would be acceptable.
Okay.
So you would don't want to do that.
Okay, then we have a map with no topo. Would that still be acceptable to schedule a public hearing? Or would you want to see that
I'd
first?
like to see a completed map before we.
Okay,
If you come to the next meeting, if he has all this stuff done, there's a 3 weeks before the meeting after that.
oh,
So it wouldn't make any difference if he gets all his stuff in by the next meeting, he can schedule the public hearing for the meeting after that.
Correct.
okay. So officially, you're not on the agenda yet, but next meeting you would be. And then you would have all the material you need, supposedly, if you had all the
1, 2, 3.
And what they're saying is we require a public hearing, on minor subdivision. And we schedule our public hearings traditionally the second meeting out to give us time to properly post it, notify adjacent property owners, so forth and so on. So, but there is a 3-week period between our next meeting, the 16th, and the first meeting in April. So that would give us plenty of time, so we could do it in the next meeting in this case. If there's enough time to do it, so. The unofficial timeline would be, we put you on our agenda for our next meeting. Hopefully we'll have all that information available on the drawing. We'll review it and then schedule the public hearing for the following.
You got a question about the ag data.
Okay?
Should this and this be included? You included Harrington's, which is way over there. This is DeCarlo's, we worked at. This is Stan Cliff's, and we worked at. Should they be included on the ag data statement?
Should be the border properties.
Yeah.
And they're currently in production, so yeah.
So you gotta,
Need another ag statement, yeah, Anthony. We'll give you one.
Okay.
that's gotta go out pretty quick to be.
Yeah, I'll give you one right now.
And then I'm not totally familiar with this, but the parcel that's the Z parcel for the Carlo,
Is this a question from you, Linda?
yeah, Rocco DeCarlo, Z parcel. I thought that was the driveway that went to Marshall's, but maybe they have an easement.
Marshall has an easement.
Okay.
Marshall would know his driveway. It's before my time, so it was a while.
It's 1960.
That's against 288.
Anthony, I got another question. Lockrow Road kind of takes a curve as it goes in front of that frontage of the parcel you're carving out.
what's the site distance like? Say you're coming out of your lot and looking left,
It's about 1,000.
you can see it up the hill.
Yeah, you can see further than that, you can see past the ends.
Is that all set? You have any questions for us? Okay, can I see on the 16th? Okay, second on our new business is Blue Sky.
Good evening, members of the board. It's Jared Lusk from Nixon Peabody. It's nice to be here now on a solar project.
Here we are.
I don't know.
We'll see shortly.
Yes, I suspect. With me is Jeff Twitty. He's a recent law school graduate, not yet admitted, but was a frustrated former assistant planner in the town of Niskayuna and then went to law school. So he's a combination of a planner and a lawyer. That there's a joke in there somewhere, I'm sure. But he's the team, and that's what brought him here. And I submitted this application on February 27th formally. I know that I've had I had some discussions with Andy and Wendy from some previous documentation that have been submitted, not by us. I understand that this underlying tower was quite a project. I wasn't here for it. I respect that process and everything that you all went through. I understand and expect probably some public involvement in this project. It's a relatively simple project in terms of what we're proposing to do. Blue Sky has been contacted by AT&T desiring to co-locate on this tower. However, in order to do it, they need to be at the top of the tower, and therefore they're proposing that 20-foot extension. It's an 85-foot monopine. They're proposing the 20-foot extension on the tower and extending the branching of the monopine up to 20 feet. And equipment going inside the existing 50 by 50 compound, and pretty straightforward, simple co-location on a complicated site, given the history. I provided, I think most importantly, the plans to document the project as it falls within that co-location, and as well as all the dimensions. I think importantly from your perspective, and I suspect from any neighbors, is what we provided in tab I of the application, which is the simulations of both the existing and the proposed view of the tower. These strategic locations, existing and proposed. All right, so there's P and X1. So again, I don't need to describe them. Pictures worth 1,000 words. I don't think there's more to the project than as I described it, recognizing the process. And they're proposing to install 9 antennas and 15 remote radio head units and cables associated with a relatively simple co-location on that monopine, extending the branches up again to continue the monopine look. The one complication, as I discussed with Mr. Gilchrist, is obviously it's considered to be an eligible facilities request under federal law. And therefore, there's a shrunken time period that we all need to be mindful of. Not that Blue Sky wants to hold your nose to the grindstone and understand it's a complicated site. Because it's an eligible facilities request, we have 60 days from the date of the application to complete the application, or it's deemed approved. Under that federal law, because it qualifies as an eligible facilities request, and how it qualifies is outlined in our application. The project, simply stated, the board must approve and can't deny the application. So from a typical approval process, because it meets that standard, that is where we are. It doesn't mean we don't have to apply for a special use permit, site plan approval, but assuming that you all agree that it qualifies as a 6409 project, you must approve it. You can't deny it. It has to be done within 60 days or it's deemed approved. And that's the Congress passed in the Middle Class Tax Relief Act back in 2014.
What are you saying?
I'll defer to your lawyer. It's complicated, but Congress, Andy, do you want to explain or do you want me to continue?
The infamous shot clock.
Did you say it must be approved in 60 days? Those words you used?
Those are the words he used, and that's what the federal statute
The
says.
statute actually says can't be denied.
If the project meets the requirements as an eligible facility.
And once you approve a tower, if somebody wants to extend it once up 20 feet, they are permitted by law. Any co-location on that tower, again, is an eligible facility and therefore is entitled to a summary review. The federal law has determined that once the tower's up, there are certain, the process that municipalities can put the wireless community through to process applications must be summary and must be, because they said, look, the tower's up, we do certain things and we must do it because of that.
Yeah, if we find that there's something missing from your application within that 60 days, that 60 days can be extended, correct?
That's true, and I respect it, and I urge you to look at the regulations of the code, though. If it is the only thing you are permitted to ask for in an application is only those items that are necessary to determine that it's an eligible facilities request, and that's the plans that show the dimension, et cetera, and I provided the SIMs on it. So, if you guys want something, ask me. I'm not trying to hit you over the head with the hammer. I'm trying to give you the parameters under which the law says we can always extend if need be, but I want you to understand from our perspective what the law says on the timing and the process. I reached out early on and spoke to Andy. I recognize this is a difficult site again with the history. I just want everybody to understand the rules that we're playing with and what the rights that our clients have here with regard to that. We don't want to be difficult, but even if a room full of people comes and we have this issue of what our rights are under the federal law, and I just want you to be aware of those. We're here to work with you. You've worked with me in the past. I'm not trying to be difficult. I just want everybody to understand the rules of the road from which we are playing.
I have a question on the rules.
Okay?
This statute that allows you a 20-foot extension, when was that in effect?
So 2014, it was it was 47 USC, I'm sorry, I lied. The Middle Class Tax Relief and Job Creation Act of 2012, not 2014. When Obama was there.
So this was about, what I'm kind of gearing at. So this was in effect when we first looked at this application.
Any tower after 2012.
Yes. And through our whole process, no one ever told us that on that application. The applicant never told us that there could be a 20-foot extension. We all went through a whole process from a 150-foot tower. We repositioned everything to this 85-foot tower. Everybody was hunky-dory. I'm just making this as a comment. If that process was available to that applicant at that point, it would have been to his advantage to say that. The applicant should have said, there's also a possibility in the future that this can be extended by 20 feet. And I think that would have changed the whole complexion of where that tower was and so forth and so on. I'm not trying to, start an argument here, but that rubs me the wrong way. And I think when these people go for these cell tower applications, they ought to be upfront about something like that. The statute says you could extend this another 20 feet. I mean, now we have an 85-foot monopine, which I took pictures of today and looked at it from Crick Road, Peninsula Lane, Eagle Point, and everything like that. Took pictures. That looks pretty nice, I mean, compared to some of them I've seen. And I think the residents are satisfied with that. An 85-foot tree is like a borderline height of a tree in our area. You put it up to 105 feet, now it's gonna look a little out of place. But they should have known that, I think, back when that first application. That could be up to here. So I'm just voicing my frustration at this point, and I apologize if I'm rambling on. But I think my opinion is shared by everybody on this board.
Can't speak to the process that followed before. I know it was the law. I don't know.
Andy, am I correct on that? That was never mentioned. To your recollection?
Not to my recollection, but there was a significant amount of review and analysis of various tower heights given various locations. And in fact, this one, my recollection of the record is that at the end, there was really two being viewed, two locations, one at 85 and one of 90 some odd feet, and ultimately this was chosen over a tower even of 90 feet. But the fact that the applicant did not raise this doesn't mean that federal law didn't exist. It does.
Yeah.
It does.
You can only do this once.
120 extension.
That's correct.
You can, all the other co-locations on it, if there were additional co-locations on the tower, would be subject to the eligible facilities if you go down the tower. So if there were additional co-locations that didn't raise it, every addition to that tower is considered.
Isn't AT&T already on that tower?
No, it's Verizon Wireless on that tower.
So you can't come back in 6 months and say, I want another 20 feet.
Well, AT&T
Correct.
put the
I
tower up.
could, but I wouldn't be given the federal rights that I have now. I'd have to go through I can ask for a 100-foot extension with you, you wouldn't grant it. But the special privileges that we've been granted under federal law are only granted one time for up to 20 feet.
Can we
And it's,
Can we
down the
say-
tower, it's
say, well,
unlimited.
you can't have 20 feet, but we'll give you 10?
Again, I'm happy to have those discussions under federal law. Again, if you read the statute, and again, I defer to Mr. Gilchrist, it does say when you make an eligible facilities request, which is up 20 feet, you must approve and you can't deny.
So is AT&T going at the top of this 20-foot extension?
Correct.
And that would
At the top, they're
allow,
going-
that would still allow for any additional co-location below that.
Correct, and
There's
each of
plenty
those,
room there.
each of those would be an eligible facility request. The limitation on the number of eligible facility requests is only on the
As long as the tower structurally you can accommodate
correct.
that load.
Correct, and there are dimensional requirements that are listed again, Mr. Golden can look at those, or Mr. Bonesteel, I can assure you that we comply with the dimensional requirements for the eligible facility request, and they're pretty particular in the regulation.
Is it far enough from the property line that if it comes down, it's not gonna end up on somebody's lawn?
Correct.
My recollection, Dave, on that is it was maybe a little under 450 feet from the line.
The dimensions are on the plan.
Yeah.
And the foundation of the existing tower probably was put in to accept an extra 20 feet, right?
Usually are generally, again, that structural report is again, not required by by federal law. I submitted it anyway because I thought you'd ask that question.
I don't know, the next guy comes in here with a cell tower is gonna get about 40 feet. So he can have his 20 and still be. This isn't gonna set well with the neighborhood, I know that. And those pictures really, if that was adding 20 feet to that tower, it sure sticks it right up there.
I understand.
I mean, you may wanna make sure that those are accurate, because
Well, that's a photo of the actual tower with the simulated top, so it's.
Well, there was much effort put into tapering the faux rims and all that, to make it very stealth.
I did ask
As I
that question.
recall.
Yeah, again, it's driven mostly by the width of the antenna arms that are required for AT&T's equipment, and they can't be reduced beyond what they are. And again, they're still within the limitations of what the federal law gives them. But again, the limbs themselves are designed to hide them and keep the tree.
I'd like to see some other information about that dimension between antenna and that they can't be reduced.
I'll get that from,
Is all the RF information in here too?
there's no RF in, under the law, we're not required to provide. The only information you're entitled to have is that information necessary to determine whether it is a facility. That is in the application and more.
Does the law require you to apply to the planning board?
It does. The law does require that if there's a local approval that needs to be obtained or amended, that application be made, but the federal law at the same time imposes very strict time limits. And if it meets certain requirements under federal law, Kevin, that statute does say shall approve and cannot deny. It's a pretty onerous federal statute in that regard.
What about the structural integrity of the foundation? That removed from our.
No, I think under the federal statute, again, as I said, it particularly says you're only required to submit the information necessary to deem it, to show that it's an eligible facility request. I provided the structural report in our application because I think every town should be aware. That's a reasonable question to ask, even though you're not required to provide.
So when does that 60-day time frame start?
February 27th. I would say maybe February 28th. We dated it February 27th, probably allowed February 28th.
It looks like it was clocked in on the 28th.
I was gonna say, look at the
Yeah,
stamp
there's a
date, yeah.
stamp on here.
Just
So you have to have a public hearing, is that correct?
That's correct.
Hope you're around for that.
I'm coming. God willing to get, I will say this, to your question about do you still need to go through the process? I will say in my experience with representing mostly Verizon and other towers throughout this, a lot of the municipalities are converting these types of projects to building permit only. So if you meet the eligible facility request, it's building permit only. Because limit, again, I heard somebody say they're wasting your time. I think it's intended that these are supposed to be summary. The federal government says you're supposed to take this out of the process. That's up to your town and how you want to deal with these, but a lot of towns are changing their codes and saying this is an administrative approval only and can get your building permit because you can't put out if it meets the standard.
Well, the mere application requires us to have a public hearing.
Oh, that's correct.
So,
Given our
you could,
current
if
code,
that
this
was
has
the
to go
case,
through the process.
and it was a building permit only, you'd avoid it. So.
Well, again, it's just, you're gonna
But
bring a lot of people.
I think, how do we react to all this? I mean, we look at all this stuff and everything like that. Well, we'll have you on our agenda, our first meeting, but it's sort of like, just useless effort to begin with.
Might as well
I'm
schedule a public
frustrated.
hearing right
I'm
now and
frustrated with the
be done with it.
Huh?
Might as well schedule a public hearing right now and be done with it. There's nothing we can do.
We still have to
Yeah.
review the application.
Correct. Wayne should review the application. We'll sit down and review that. It does need to be a determination that it's an eligible facilities application.
Okay.
And I do have one question outstanding in my mind, which is the seeker overlay on this. It is subject to seeker review, and those timeframes potentially don't really mesh well with those federal timelines. And that's something I'll review with Wayne in particular.
Okay.
We did go through a fairly extended, thorough seeker review. There was an underlying made back on this, a very extensive record. there were other, this is another issue under seeker, which is there are a number of involved agencies on the underlying. This is amending that. Are we going to have to place those other agencies on notice? Do we need to go through an additional lead agency coordination? I would think this is the only involved agency on this particular application. Are there any other involved agencies that you listed in your EAF that from which you need approvals for this additional 20 feet?
I don't think so. The issue with seeker is this. It's not a discretionary approval anymore, correct? Because the federal law says you must grant, you can't deny, and so forth. I'm only telling you what some people, some municipalities.
It's interesting, and yet going through a special use permit and site plan review, those reviews are by their very nature discretionary. So it's an odd combination. You're right.
Doesn't matter. I mean, we listed the EAF, and we'll do whatever you want to do, but again, in terms of the timing, the 60th day, they have their rights. I'm not gonna, if we're doing something and because of schedules and something needs to happen, great. We'll try to work with you, in terms of making it 70 days or something so that the board can meet or something if you want to do that. I don't think the client is averse to that. The point is it's got to be summary and given the law. I understand you're going to have a public hearing. You fill the room with 100 people and their rights are under the law what they are and do that. Again, that's why I'm seeing a lot of municipalities change their telecom code to make it an administrative review and building permit so that people are going to come out and be very, I suspect that people are upset about the project and be very mad that we're in a situation where we are with the law that you have no discretion. And again, summarizing that, they're wasting their time to come to the hearing, right? And that's because, that's from the federal law, not because we don't care.
It's interesting. It does raise an interesting issue because the seeker review included a visual impact assessment at 85 feet, very extensive. And I understand the current application may not have much discretion attached to it, but I do question then the impact on the underlying seeker record. I don't know the answer to that. I'm not sure there's been a lot of law on that issue, Jared.
Yeah, again, they understand they reviewed, if you read the FCC regulations interpreting the middle class tax relief, moratoriums, all the things that typically they just said, ladies and gentlemen, the federal law is what it was intended to, I think California, they're very similar to seeker.
Yeah.
Would it do whatever you gotta do, but you gotta be done in 60 days. So if you can't do it, you can't do it. If you can, you can, great, but if you can't complete your process within the 60 days, then it's deemed approved. Now, yeah, we're here to tell you that if
So we're almost like a better off just standing down and let you do the 60 days.
that's up to you.
And then that way you don't have any.
That'll get discussed. I'd like to review that. All of these issues, if you would, Wayne. Let Wayne get the application documents reviewed. I'll go over the EAF with him and we'll drill down on this.
I have a technical question. Your request states that in order to provide adequate and reliable service to emergency services, businesses, and individuals. And I think originally there was an area along Crick Road or something that had a dead zone. Is that correct, Chuck?
Route 2 was the main thing. There was a dead zone along Route 2 on Brunswick Road.
Okay.
As far as I can tell, it's
Put the
still
tower
there.
up, and you got a carrier on there that's providing that coverage. Right, correct. Well, the facility is supplying, provide an adequate, reliable service.
For Verizon, not for AT&T. So if you have an AT&T phone, you're not gonna get it.
So what happens if another major provider wants to go on this tower?
Well, look, there's three major providers. For providing service. There's AT&T, Verizon, Wireless, and T-Mobile.
Okay,
It's quite possible that T-Mobile may want to co-locate this tower at some point in the future. All three of them are usually on towers, right? I think it's reasonable to suspect they would be, as long as there's no more 20 feet, right? That's been used.
Yeah.
In terms of an extension, but if they wanted to co-locate on the tower, I think they would qualify as an eligible facility.
okay. Now let's jump a little bit ahead, and all of a sudden there's a fourth, fifth, and sixth carrier. How do they jump on this provision to provide, reliable service? Do you understand what I'm saying? You know where I'm going?
As long as they're under 20 feet, they're good.
I mean,
As long as they're under 20 feet.
As long as they're on the existing tower.
Right.
okay. And how many carriers can this tower hold?
It would depend on the equipment that they want to put on, but most of them are designed to cover 3 or 4. Most of your codes require you to build it so that it'll accommodate up to 3 or 4 carriers, because I think globally, I think, maybe not, you'd much prefer to have AT&T co-locate on this tower, even with a 20-foot extension, than to build a 105-foot tower down the street. Maybe you wouldn't, right? But and I think the FCC viewed that as, once you've got the tower there, you may as well use it as much as you can and not hold people up and doing it.
Is there an option to move Verizon to the top and AT&T to 10 feet below Verizon?
I think it's something, I think it's something that's a reasonable question to ask. I know Verizon's there, they are, is it, you're asking that question because of the size of the antenna? Is that, that's an interesting question. I can ask that question.
Well, you can't,
Is a prime location now in the extension? I think that's what she's asking. Would the original carrier have the option of going to a more optimum spot on the tower?
Well, I think most times, obviously, the top spot is the best.
Yeah.
Probably because you get the best coverage.
Yeah.
I think, in this instance, I don't think Verizon, was happy where they were. They don't need to raise up the other 20 feet, so maybe why go through the process of doing it and having AT&T replace them. I understand your question. And I'll inquire whether for visibility, I think that's what you're saying from a visibility perspective, if those two antenna arrays could swap out. Let's ask that question.
Are you saying the size of the antenna array? It would blend in better with the, okay, that's interesting.
It's a good question. I'll ask that question.
Does anybody have any questions at this point? I mean, we obviously have to do some review on this. Wayne and Andy have to do their thing, so,
So is it deemed a complete application, or do we still need to have time for?
It is, as I read the federal law, the 60-day clock does start upon submission of the required application form, but that doesn't prohibit the municipality from reviewing it and asking for additional information to complete the application.
We've been through this once.
Through this one, correct.
Let me read you the regulations, just so everybody is clear regarding the documentation that's required for review. I'm going to read it right from the statute, just so everybody's on the same page.
That's in our document?
It is, it's tab C. Toward the bottom there, it says documentation required for review. When an applicant asserts in writing that a request for a modification is covered by this section, state or local government may require the applicant to provide documentation or information only to the extent reasonably related to determine whether the request meets the requirements of this section. The state or local government may not require an applicant to submit any other documentation, including but not limited to documentation intended to illustrate the need for the facility or justify the business decisions to modify such practices. They pay a lot of admin for lobbyists, just saying.
All of it.
Right, but having said that, and what I need to sit down and go through with Wayne is there are certain criteria to meet whether you're an eligible facility. One of them that's a little, and I know there's a lot of discussion about it, but does this impair the stealth kind of intent character of the original approval? And simply adding height doesn't do that. And by and large, the way I read it thus far, subject to further review, is if the proposed amendment no longer makes it look like a tree, that wouldn't qualify. But even if it's higher, if it continues to look like a tree, then it would qualify. And that's how I've read at least the FCC stuff on what the eligible facility is and what the impairment of the stealth character of it is. And from what I gather from the application, it looks like a pine tree up to 85 feet, and the proposal is to add 20 more feet and still make that additional 20 feet to the extent it can look like a pine tree. That may qualify then as an eligible facility because it's not impairing the stealth character of the original tower design. Subject to further review and subject to review with Wayne, but and there's stuff about, Jared did mention to you earlier, this would be within the existing cabinet area within the base. That's another component. You can extend it a certain amount of
It
distance.
can't be 20 feet off, the arms of the antennas can't be more than 20 feet, they can't be 20 foot higher with 10-foot booms. It's in the existing fence compound, we had it designed so that it would accommodate kind of location. And so, not at all trying to be difficult, it just meets the,
Right,
meets the
so
dimensional requirements.
we'll just, obviously, it's an extensive application. We'll get that reviewed by Wayne. I'll sit down and go through that with him, just to confirm that it meets the requirements. My suggestion would be that this does need to be placed on your next meeting agenda. We'll have that reviewed prior to that. And presuming everything is there that shows it meets an eligible facilities request, then like the earlier, because of that 3-week timeframe, get the public hearing scheduled for your first meeting in April, just to keep the process moving. That would be at least a procedural recommendation. But I think Wayne should have time to review it.
Okay. And we will see you on the 16th, I guess.
You want to see me on the 16th, you will see me, just make sure I'm still there.
When's our next meeting? Maybe I misstated that.
That's fine, I can come on the 16th. If we're gonna, can I say this? If the application is complete and all we're gonna do is set the public hearing.
I think that's fair. If Wayne and I have a chance to review that and confirm, and we'll be presenting to you that in our opinion, it does meet the requirements as an eligible facility, and all you'll be doing is scheduling a public hearing. There's certainly no need to.
I'm coming from Rochester,
No, I didn't hear you. I didn't realize you were coming. Okay, that's fine.
I can send Jeff. Oh, damn. I was gonna send him to the public.
I think it's still coming to the public.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be an attorney.
I think at the public hearing, you ought to be very upfront about the regulations before anybody speaks. And, let them vent their frustrations. But the only thing that I will comment on, usually after a public hearing, we require the applicant to do a written response. And that's gonna be
That's unfortunately, that's going to be dictated by the federal law here.
Yeah.
We do have to go through the process, but if in fact it meets the standards as an eligible facility, and I'll advise the board on that issue
Okay.
at the public meeting.
Yeah, if you could do that, so I'm not telling the board, I'm happy to inform the public, but I think if you say it to the board and then everybody, then it's more, since it's coming from you, but I'm happy to,
We'll take that under advisement.
yeah. I'm happy to provide clarity. Whatever you want me to do, I'm not putting that on you.
Not at all, I understand that. But you understand the board. Again, you've been very upfront, and I think the board appreciates that approach. And in turn, being very upfront, I do think not to blindside you, because you were not on the underlying review. The neighbors were very, very concerned about this location. They went through an extensive review on various locations, elevations, tower heights, balloon flies, drone. There was a lot done, and the neighbors still were very upset about this. To hear that, okay, you got your 85-foot tower, and now you have to get 20-foot, and no matter what you say, it doesn't matter. You're right. Will not go over well. That may be what federal law requires, but it will not be, in this particular case, given the extent of the review and the neighbor interest in this, may not be well received.
Anecdotally, I would tell you that this law is obviously been around I have a very controversial tower, very similar sounding anyway, so I wasn't there, but very, very similar sounding in the town of Pompey in Syracuse. And we ended up agreeing, we wanted a 120-foot tower. They approved 100. We went to litigation, but as one of the conditions of the approval of the resolution, they attempted to require us to enter into a deed restriction that prevented us from extending the tower to 100. And through the litigation, which was sort of a unique way and effort of a property rights way to try to control the limitation of the height of the tower. Supreme Court came and said, you can't do that, right? So they're serious about that 20-foot extension and municipalities' ability to control it. I think the right thing to do when new towers come up, and I served on the town board, I get it, the position that everybody's in, is that you require, knowing that 20-foot can be extended on these towers, is that you have to consider the visibility of the extra 20 feet, no matter when anybody's coming in. And that's how you do, you have to make that assumption that it's coming, and then you do that.
Again, you weren't the attorney or the group of representatives on that. They made it very clear that this was an 85-foot tower without any discussion of an additional 20 feet. And given the extent of the review on visual simulations, there was no discussion about, well, we ought to go through the simulation for an additional 20 feet. None. And whether that was simply an oversight, I don't know, but it was not. And because of the extent of the time discussing that, the extent of the reports done, the level of public interest, neighbor and board on that issue, not to have raised that, maybe not legally required, is still not going to be potentially well received by the neighbors or by the board. Knowing that federal law may require you to act in a certain way anyway, just that's
Doesn't make it feel.
that's correct. Yeah.
All right, so we'll see you on the 316 if need be. If not, we will see you at the April public hearing.
Yeah, you're gonna notify him. what-
Correct, we'll coordinate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Just
Yeah, I
to-
don't
just-
know, we don't have any other new business?
No, we don't, but just to clarify something on the first applicant, Ridge Road and High Meadow Road were deeded in 1936 by a May L.G. Betts, C. Day, and R. Reynolds, and R. McKinney. So that is not a highway by use, that is a deeded roadway, Ridge Road.
Chuck,
Sorry, Jerry. I'm sorry.
Just to follow up, Wendy did ask me, how did we come up with the address of 207 Creek Road?
Mm-hmm.
If you could just tell her, we didn't put it in that subsequent letter, that's the address that 911 assigned the tower.
National Grid assignment. Okay. It's had a few numbers. I think it was 221 Creek when you were pouring the base.
And that's what they told me. I don't know that she reported that. Thank you, folks.
Okay.
Have a good night.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Where were we?
For what that's worth. In other words, the 33, the deeded width, 33 feet, that is in the ownership of the owner.
Up to a certain point.
Correct.
Yes, up to a certain point. You are correct. I'll pull the deed. And that's why it's kind of interesting. What it says is Ridge Road to High Meadow Road. High Meadow Road being the first cul-de-sac. The second cul-de-sac, Fox Hollow, and then after that, Ridge continues. So I've got to pull the deed on that and see exactly
It's
what
still a,
the.
it's still a cul-de-sac road with one way in, one way out. Across.
But that brings up the question of the encroachment.
Anybody have anything else?
What happens if they go beyond the 60 days?
It gets approved. Automatic approval.
Well, I think, no, there's some case law that talks about what the appropriate remedy is. Will a court order that it be approved, or will it remand it with direction to act within a certain time frame? It's not as draconian as it's automatically approved. There would be litigation if you fail to meet the 60 days. And depending on the record, federal courts generally will not order that it be approved, but it be remanded to act within a certain limited period of time to meet the spirit and intent of the time frames.
Is there official definition of a stealth?
Yes.
Or-
Still not.
I mean, that, you know, what he's showing there to me is, seems very narrow, it's like, you use a little more shape to hide it. A little bit better. I mean, it just looks like a straight shaft.
They-
Yeah,
but
like
it
I
was,
said, I went to that and took a look at it, Creek Road, Ridge, Eagle Ridge, and stuff like that. And the way I have it now, you'd have to look twice at it to say that it was a tower. I mean, it's sort of.
It doesn't jump out height-wise. Doesn't jump out height-wise.
Yeah, but you put another 20 feet on it, it's gonna jump, right? You might as well make it a 105-foot pine tree, you know what I mean?
And issues about how it looks, while it may not be legally required to work with you, I think at least the company's representative tonight said that they'll work with the town to the extent that they can, if there's some things that can be done to better, but that might be speculation.
Mhm.
So under some FCC guidance documents, we clarify that concealment elements, that's what they call it, stealth design or concealment elements, are elements of a stealth design facility intended to make the facility look like something other than a wireless tower or base station. So that's the generic definition they use. And when they say you can't substantially change or impair the concealment element, they make it very clear that since a 20-foot extension is allowed under federal law, the mere increase in height is not a substantial impairment to the concealment element. It's if the extension doesn't look like a pine tree. And if they're proposing to put branches on, it probably meets.
So if it looks like the tree below it,
Yeah.
you have a hard argument.
Hard argument that it has substantially impaired the concealment element.
There's a cell tower up in Saratoga. They built a silo to put so it would look like part of the farming community. But
Yeah, I did one of those one time down off the Cottage Street Parkway. I think it's still there.
I'll give you one more thing, just as you're considering this stuff. Clarification of defeating concealment. Next, we clarify that to defeat concealment, the proposed modification must cause a reasonable person to view the structure's intended stealth design as no longer effective. In other words, if the stealth design features would continue effectively to make the structure appear not to be a wireless facility, then the modification would not defeat concealment. If it still looks like a pine tree, even though it's much taller, it doesn't defeat the concealment element.
cover the tracks pretty good. I think we got push wrap this, so that's one.
Well, I remember a question about radiation came up. You were closest to this tower. I think we're gonna hear more about that with an additional 20 feet.
It may play to our advantage because no longer is the antenna at the bedroom window. Now it's up above the roof. It's a
Well,
joke,
again,
Don.
in the seeker findings, there was an extensive section on potential health impacts, so that was analyzed and it's
It's all
been addressed
negative.
in the underlying seeker finding.
I would just like to say that I stand by my initial remark that this would be a lot smoother if the original applicant went through the process of telling us that this could be potential and telling the public that it could potentially be another 20 feet.
You would have been tarred and feathered,
Well, it would have been,
honest, but
it may have moved the position of it.
I may have
It may have gone back to the original position down below.
approved a 75-foot tower instead of an 85-foot tower.
Or 60.
I mean, the next guy who comes in is gonna get a 40-foot tower, and, I mean, you know,
Or the next guy that comes in and wants to build one that's at 100 feet, you say, thank you very much, we're reviewing this at 120.
Yep.
And Kevin, I'll finish by reading the section that seems so onerous under federal law. Review of applications. A state or local government may not deny and shall approve any eligible facilities request for modification of an eligible facility.
We're gonna get tarred and feathered.
That's that. They're not gonna
You're
happen.
bound by federal law.
It makes us look
they can vote us out.
bored.
Well, I would like to clarify in the public hearing that when we first started, we did not know that. Would that be appropriate?
I don't think that, in my opinion, would be well received. I think it's gonna be a good exercise to go back through the fairly extensive record, including the minutes, and most particularly including what representations were made by the company's representative at the time, and indicate that this is how the project was presented, and this is now simply required under federal law. So you did review the application that was presented to you in great detail, and this is simply federal law governs.
And at the time, they said that if they wanted to extend the tower, they would have to come back for approval.
Yeah, and that's what they're doing. It just happens to doing it to an extent that's allowed under federal law without much discretion on the part of the town. It's almost in the nature of, the federal government has deemed this to be such a de minimis modification that it's almost like that's part of what was approved. They said 20 feet is such a minor de minimis modification that, and Jared's not incorrect on this.
The law says 10% or 20 feet.
It says 10% of the height of 20 feet, so here 10% will only be 8.5 feet. right?
Whichever is greater.
Whichever is greater. So,
No more than 20.
yeah.
Okay, we have 4 items on our agenda, our next agenda. Rao, waiver of subdivision. Riser, waiver of subdivision. Crab. Regad?
Grab.
G-R-A-B.
Grabowski.
Grab,
What it was.
Grab, I'm sorry. Grab, and then Blue Sky.
What about forward?
haven't seen an application yet. So when the application comes in, they'll be coming in, well, again, as new business once the application is received. Have the initial meeting being a sketch plan conference.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion.
Second,
I'll second.
all those in favor? Any opposed?
You know that little gas station for Roxy Cleaners? The one, that's now a Stewart's Express.
Yeah, mobile on those, or like a mobile on the water or something.